Water in your gas tank is one of the fastest ways to destroy your engine. Over 30% of gas stations in America have underground storage tanks with serious water contamination issues. That's hundreds of thousands of stations selling fuel that can seize your engine in less than 100 miles. I've torn down engines where just one tank of water-contaminated gas caused $7,000 in damage. Corroded fuel pumps, rusted injectors, destroyed catalytic converters. The worst part is most drivers have no idea their fuel is contaminated until it's too late. By the time you notice the rough idle or check engine light, the damage is already done. Water doesn't just dilute your gasoline. It actively attacks every metal component in your fuel system. It causes flash rust in fuel lines, destroys pump bearings, and turns injector internals into corroded paperweights. I've seen fuel filters that look like they'd been pulled from a swamp, thick with rust and sediment. So today, I'm counting down the 12 gas station brands with the worst water contamination track records. And at the end, I'll show you the 3 brands that actually keep their tanks clean and your engine running like it should. Let's get into it. Starting at number 12, we have Arco. Most folks see Arco and think cheap gas, quick fill up, get on with your day. But Arco stations are independently owned, which means quality control varies wildly from location to location. Some invest in modern equipment and tanks, most don't. The problem is their underground storage tanks. Many Arco locations use older single-wall tanks that haven't been updated since the 1990s. When groundwater seeps through cracks or failed seals, it settles at the bottom because water is heavier than gasoline. Every pump draws from the bottom of that tank. That means you're pulling water first. I had a customer last month, Honda Accord, with 72,000 miles. She filled up at an Arco station on her way to work. Made it about 15 miles before the engine started sputtering and losing power. She thought maybe she got bad gas, tried to drive it home. Big mistake. We drained the tank and found nearly 3 gallons of water mixed with the gas. Her fuel pump was already showing corrosion. The sending unit had rust forming, and 2 of the injectors had started to rust internally. The repair bill came to $1,800 just to get her back on the road. She saved $4 at the pump and paid for it 100 times over. Arco stations aren't required to test their tanks as frequently as top-tier locations, which means contamination can go undetected for months. Number 11 brings us to Quick Trip, and this one surprises people because Quick Trip has a decent reputation in some regions. But between 2020 and 2023, multiple Quick Trip locations across the Midwest were cited for water infiltration in their underground tanks. The company blamed heavy rainfall and aging infrastructure, but that doesn't help the drivers who paid the price. One case that stands out happened in Oklahoma. A family filled up their Chevy Tahoe at a Quick Trip before heading out on vacation. 30 miles down the highway, the engine started knocking. Another 20 miles and it died completely. The mechanic found the fuel filter completely clogged with rust particles, and the fuel itself was 50% water. The entire fuel system had to be replaced. Fuel pump, injectors, fuel lines, even the tank needed professional cleaning. Total damage, $5,400. Quick Trip eventually reimbursed them, but only after weeks of fighting and a threatened lawsuit. The problem with chains this big is they can't maintain consistent standards across hundreds of locations. At number 10, we've got Speedway, which markets itself as a premium convenience store brand. Clean bathrooms, good coffee, friendly service. But what's coming out of their fuel pumps is another story. Speedway has been cited multiple times for failing underground storage tank inspections. In 2021 alone, over 40 Speedway locations across 5 states failed water contamination tests. The pattern is always the very same: old tanks, deferred maintenance, and water seeping in fast. I worked on a Ford F-150 that filled up at a speedway in Indiana. The truck had 93,000 miles until that one fill-up. Within 50 miles, the check engine light came on. We pulled the fuel filter, and it looked like it had been sitting in a swamp. Brown, rusty water poured out when we drained the tank. The fuel pump was toast, 3 injectors were corroded beyond repair, and the catalytic converter had started to break down. That repair cost $6,200, and Speedway refused to cover any of it. Number 9 is Racetrack, and this brand really gets under my skin because they position themselves as higher quality. Big modern stations, competitive prices, loyalty programs. But the reality behind those polished facades is troubling. Racetrack has had repeated issues with water contamination, particularly in the Southeast. In 2022, a Racetrack station in Georgia sold contaminated fuel to over 200 vehicles in a single weekend. One victim was a woman with a brand new Toyota Camry, less than 8,000 miles on the odometer. She filled up Saturday morning, and by Sunday afternoon, her car wouldn't start. The dealer found water throughout the entire fuel system. The contamination had already started attacking the high-pressure fuel pump and direct injectors. Those parts alone cost $4,800 to replace, and that didn't include labor. Racetrack dragged their feet on the claim for 3 months. Sliding into number 8 is Circle K. Circle K operates thousands of stations worldwide, and with that scale comes serious quality control problems. Some stations have modern tanks with leak detection. Others are running equipment from the 1980s. The result is fuel quality that ranges from fine to catastrophic. One Nissan Altima came in with rough idle complaints. When we dropped the fuel tank, we found a layer of water sitting at the bottom that was 2 inches thick. The fuel pump had visible rust, and the injectors were clogged with sediment. The repair took 3 days and cost $3,900. Circle K blamed the distributor, the weather, anyone but themselves. Number 7 takes us to Murphy, USA. Murphy stations are almost always located next to Walmart stores, built for high volume and low prices. That business model doesn't leave room for premium storage or rigorous maintenance. Multiple Murphy locations have failed state inspections for water in their tanks. Last year, a Murphy station in Louisiana sold water-contaminated gas to over 90 vehicles before authorities shut down the pumps. One victim was a GMC Sierra diesel with 40,000 miles. Water destroyed the high-pressure fuel pump, damaged all 8 injectors, contaminated the fuel filter housing, and got into the engine oil. Total repair cost exceeded $12,000, and the owner fought Murphy USA for 8 months to get reimbursed. At number 6, we find Love's Travel Stops, a brand truckers and travelers depend on. Love's operates massive truck stops with underground tanks that hold tens of thousands of gallons. Water contamination at Love's is a recurring problem, especially in regions with high water tables or frequent flooding. I've worked on diesel pickups that filled up at Love's and broke down within 100 miles. In one case, a contractor with a Ram 3500 filled up at a Love's in Arkansas. He made it 60 miles before losing power. When we diagnosed it, water had contaminated the entire diesel system. The CP4 high-pressure fuel pump failed, sending metal shavings everywhere. That meant replacing the pump, all 8 injectors, the fuel rails, and flushing every fuel line. Repair cost was over $14,000. Number 5 is where things get truly disturbing, and that's Getty gas stations. Getty has been cited repeatedly for underground storage tank violations, and their water contamination issues are well documented. In 2023, A Getty station in New Jersey was shut down after inspectors found that their tanks had been leaking water into the fuel for over 6 months. Hundreds of vehicles were affected before anyone investigated. One of those vehicles belonged to a teacher who filled up her Honda CR-V before driving to work. The car had 98,000 miles and had been perfectly maintained. Within a week of that fill-up, the check engine light came on, the idle became rough, and fuel economy dropped dramatically. When we tested the fuel, it was 30% water. The entire fuel system was compromised. Fuel pump corroded, fuel filter clogged with rust, injectors showing early signs of internal corrosion. We caught it before catastrophic damage occurred, but it still cost her $2,900 to fix. Getty refused to take responsibility, claiming she couldn't prove the water came from their station. That kind of corporate denial is what makes these companies so dangerous. Coming in at number 4 is Valero. Valero is a major oil company with stations across the country, but their fuel quality control is surprisingly poor for a company that size. Valero stations have been flagged numerous times for water contamination, particularly in Gulf Coast states where flooding is common. The problem is that many Valero stations use older tank systems that weren't designed for extreme weather. When floods hit, water gets into the tanks. I worked on a Lexus RX 350 that filled up at a Valero station in Houston after a heavy rainstorm. The owner noticed the car running rough within 20 miles. We found water mixed throughout the fuel system, and the high-pressure fuel pump was already failing. Lexus fuel systems are expensive to repair because they use premium components. Fuel pump, fuel filter, injectors, and a complete fuel system flush came to $7,400. Valero's response was to offer her a $200 gift card. That's an insult. Number 3 brings us to a brand with one of the worst water contamination track records in the industry, and that's Sunoco. Despite their association with racing and performance fuel, their regular stations have serious problems. Sunoco has been cited in multiple states for underground storage tank failures that allowed water to contaminate fuel supplies. In 2022, a Sunoco station in Pennsylvania sold water-contaminated fuel to over 300 vehicles before someone finally reported it to state regulators. The station knew they had a problem because multiple customers had complained, but they kept the pumps running anyway. One of those customers was a construction company owner with a fleet of work trucks. He filled up all 6 of his trucks at that Sunoco station on a Monday morning. By Wednesday, 4 of the 6 trucks were showing symptoms: rough idle, poor acceleration, check engine lights. By Friday, 2 of them wouldn't start at all. When a mobile mechanic came out to diagnose the fleet, he found water contamination in every single truck. The total repair bill for 6 trucks was over $31,000. Lost work time, towing fees, and rental trucks added another $10,000. The construction company sued Sunoco and eventually settled, but the case took 2 years to resolve. That's the reality of these companies. They'll risk your engine, your safety, and your financial security rather than invest in proper tank maintenance. At number 2, we have a category of stations that's even more dangerous than any single brand. And that's independent no-name stations that buy fuel from whoever offers the cheapest price that week. These are the stations you see on rural highways or in low-income neighborhoods. No brand name, just gas or fuel on a hand-painted sign. The fuel quality at these stations is a complete gamble because there's no corporate oversight, no quality standards, and often no accountability when something goes wrong. I've seen engines destroyed by fuel from these stations that was so contaminated it looked like mud. One case that still haunts me was a young couple who filled up at an independent station in rural Texas while driving cross-country. They had a Mazda CX-5 with 63,000 miles. Clean car, well-maintained, no issues. 20 miles after filling up, the engine started misfiring. 50 miles later, it wouldn't go faster than 40 miles per hour. They barely made it to the next town. When a local shop drained the tank, they found fuel that was over 60% water with visible sediment floating in it. The fuel pump had seized, all 4 injectors were clogged, and the fuel tank itself was so contaminated it needed to be chemically cleaned. The repair cost $4,800, and the station owner claimed he bought the fuel from a legitimate distributor and refused to help. These no-name stations are death traps for your engine, and you should avoid them at all costs. And now, the absolute worst offender when it comes to water-contaminated fuel. Number 1 on this list. This isn't just one brand or one station. This is the entire category of gas stations that have been shut down by state authorities for selling fuel so contaminated it should never have been in anyone's gas tank. These are stations that knowingly sold fuel with catastrophic levels of water contamination. Stations that ignored customer complaints. Stations that kept pumps running even after failing inspections. Some of these operations were actually criminal enterprises that mixed water with fuel deliberately to increase their profits. In 2021, federal investigators shut down a fuel distribution network that had been adulterating gasoline with water and selling it to stations across 4 states. The fuel was sometimes 40 to 50% water, and the damage it caused was devastating. Engines seized, fuel systems destroyed, catalytic converters ruined. One victim filled up at a station that bought this contaminated fuel, and her engine locked up solid 37 miles down the road. The connecting rods had punched through the engine block because water doesn't compress like gasoline does. When the pistons tried to compress that water during the combustion stroke, the engine destroyed itself from the inside. The car was totaled, 7 years old, 78,000 miles, worth about $12,000, now worth nothing. All because someone decided to mix water with gasoline to make an extra buck per gallon. But here's the good news. Not every station is out to destroy your engine. There are 3 brands that actually invest in quality fuel storage, regular tank inspections, and water detection systems that shut down pumps automatically if contamination is detected. Number 3 on the safe list is Costco. Their fuel is top-tier certified, which means it meets strict detergent standards. But more importantly, they test their tanks weekly for water contamination. Costco's fuel turnover is so high that their tanks are essentially refilled every 48 hours, which means the fuel is always fresh and any contamination is caught immediately. They use aerospace-grade filtration systems and automatic contamination detection. Number 2 is Shell. Shell V power stations use advanced tank monitoring systems that detect water levels in real time. If water reaches a certain threshold, the pumps automatically shut down until the problem is fixed. I've seen engines with 300,000 miles that ran exclusively on Shell fuel, and the internals look like they have half that mileage. Clean injectors, no carbon buildup, fuel pumps still flowing strong. And number 1, the absolute best brand for avoiding water contamination is Chevron. Chevron stations are required to test their tanks monthly, and they use double-walled tanks with leak detection systems at almost every location. Their Techron fuel formula also contains corrosion inhibitors that protect your fuel system components even if trace amounts of water make it through. I've torn down engines that ran on Chevron for over 400,000 miles, and the fuel pumps and injectors looked nearly new. Valves clean, pistons free of carbon, combustion chambers showing minimal deposits. That's the difference quality fuel makes when you're putting in 50 tanks a year for 10 years. Your engine will thank you, your wallet will thank you, and you won't be the person calling a tow truck because water destroyed your fuel system 50 miles from home. Stick with brands that actually care about fuel quality, not just profit margins. Your engine depends on it.